Hi, my name is Dr. Agata Gomolka and I'm an assistant curator at the Norwich Castle Museum and Art Gallery. Welcome to Talking Objects Christmas Special. Today we will explore how this remarkable 16th century Netherlandish painting made its way to the Norfolk Museums collection. Let me introduce this fascinating object. It is a triptych, a painting of 3 sections consisting a central panel and 2 hinged wings. The lofty curves of the original frame, with its double curved ogee arch, make the open altarpiece look indeed like a winged creature. The subject of this painting is the popular medieval and Renaissance theme of the Adoration of the Christ child. These scenes typically show various figures contemplating the newborn Jesus. The anonymous painter infused this rather common Christmas subject with great imagination and unexpected dynamism. The group gathered round the Christ child, placed on his mother's flowing robes, is rather extraordinary. The angel kneeling in the foreground is dressed in some of the most splendid embroidered golden robes ever seen on a creature like this. Each of the 3 angels is reacting in a different way. One gazes pensively, another folds hands in prayer, and the third raises hands in praise. Above the angel, Mary's husband Joseph is shown in an unusually dynamic pose, very different from the pensive detachment in which he is more often depicted. Here Joseph is shown leaning towards Mary, his splendid crimson robes billowing in a wind, as if he just stepped into the picture with a jug in his hand. Joseph, Mary, and the child are interconnected by the exchanges of affectionate looks, of Joseph at his wife, of Mary at her son, and above all, of Christ at his mother. The mother and child are additionally connected by the golden rays of light, or halos, around them. The golden rays and the golden beading running down Mary's locks are among the features that fix the painting in that fluid artistic phase between Gothic and Renaissance styles. The most striking Renaissance feature of our painting is the splendid landscape stretching in perspective behind the figures. The group is shown in a fantastic setting, on a threshold of interior and exterior spaces. The vista is interrupted by palaces, villas, and ragged rocks. There's also a small but prominent building with a typically Northern European shingled roof. The fascinating mixture of medieval and Renaissance forms is also present in the lofty architecture directly above the Holy Family, where we see Gothic columns next to Renaissance pilasters. The boundaries between the real and imagined world are broken down in the wings of the triptych, where 2 saints present a group of real people kneeling in veneration of the scene in the center. Those real people are the patrons who paid to be portrayed in the act of devotion to the Holy Family. On the right, 2 women, perhaps sisters, are shown kneeling in prayer, their prayer beads in hand. Beside them are miniature figures who probably represent the daughters of the older, more important woman. The women and girls are accompanied by Saint Barbara, dressed in a most elaborate bodice and headdress. Such fanciful, often exotic-looking outfits were the more conspicuous signs of the style called the Northern Mannerism, centered around Antwerp in the early 16th century. Saint Barbara holds a large and splendid book and sumptuous plume quill. Behind the saint is her most recognizable attribute, the tower in which she was imprisoned. The powerful and popular female saint in the right wing is paralleled by the most important male saint, Peter. Clutching his mighty bronze key in one hand, Peter rests his right hand on the shoulder of the primary male donor, probably the husband of the woman on the opposite side. This male donor figure is accompanied by other adult men, possibly his brothers, and by miniature figures representing boys, perhaps his sons and nephews. The subject matter and style of the triptych allow us to suspect that it was made somewhere in or around Antwerp in the first decades of the 16th century. This was the beginning of its remarkable journey. The painting was commissioned by a family with the financial means and connections to mark their status and commemorate their piety. The relatively modest size of the triptych indicates that the family commissioned it for a private chapel or for a small altar in their local church. A lack of coats of arms or inscriptions makes their identification impossible, but the choice of the saints, Peter and Barbara, may be indicative of either the names or the parish allegiances of the patrons. We return to our question of how the painting made its way from Antwerp to Norwich. As you may have rightly guessed, this is a question that can only be partially answered. What we know is that at some point in its biography, the triptych travelled to England. When this happened and in what circumstances remains unclear. Was it brought to Norwich soon after its creation? Was it made for Flemish patrons living in England, perhaps for patrons in Norwich? Or did it arrive on these shores at a much later date, as an acquisition in a vibrant Dutch and Flemish art market? What we can say with certainty is that the triptych was well looked after. It is in a relatively good condition and looks to have been only rarely opened. Sometime in the 19th century, the painting made its way to the collection of Jeremiah James Colman, the famous mustard maker of Norwich. Colman may have kept the painting at Cliff House, the family's seaside residence at Corton in East Suffolk, a village picturesquely positioned on a high cliff. The contents of the house had to be rescued when in 1917 the house started to crumble into the sea. A Netherlandish triptych may have then returned to Norwich, to the family's main residence at Carrow House, to be looked after by Jeremiah's daughters, Helen and Ethel. After Helen's death in 1948, at the end of her stay at Carrow House, Ethel donated the painting to the Norwich Museums. The donation is recorded in the museum register as made, quote, on behalf of herself and the late Miss Helen Colman, end quote. This brief entry marks the end of the painting's long and mysterious journey, at once preserving the memory of two sisters who were its last private owners, and referring us back to the painting itself, where two other sisters may be shown in perpetual prayer. Thank you for watching, and be sure to explore more talking objects from our collections.